Hello, this is Warhammer Workshop, and here is episode 6 of Nintendo or SEGA, Searching for Memories, my gaming podcast. This episode is entitled Donkey Kong vs. Sonic the Hedgehog, namely the two series of games. I realised after just making my Donkey Kong history podcast and looking into the new games and remembering the older ones, that the Donkey Kong series may just be greater than the Sonic series. Thus, without question, making it one of the greatest video game series of all time, not to mention one of the most important, if not the single most important series in history. So let us begin by comparing the two series overall. The Donkey Kong series has over 30 games, while the Sonic series has nearly 100, making both some of the largest in the world. Clearly, Sonic has domination in terms of sheer library size. However, many of those Sonic games do not have Sonic as the main or one of the main roles. So let us actually compare the proper Donkey Kong and Sonic games. Note that games such as Donkey Kong Country 2 will be included. Although the mascot is not the starring character, he is one of the main characters. However, games such as Mario Kart and Mario and Sonic at the Olympics do not count, since they are Mario games with Donkey Kong and Sonic thrown in. So, going by that criteria, there are over 20 Donkey Kong games and around 30 Sonic games. I will break them down into 2D and 3D games and also into modern and retro games, modern being 2000 or later, retro being 1999 or earlier, which I will list in a moment. Although Donkey Kong had a head start of exactly 10 years, Sonic has done remarkably well and has been one of the main focuses of SEGA since Sonic's release in 1991. I should note that Donkey Kong actually has a few series within the overall series, namely Donkey Kong Country, Donkey Kong and Donkey Konga. In fact, there are really two Donkey Kong lines, the first being the traditional Donkey Kong games, and the second being the Donkey Kong Land series, which is a spin-off from the Country series. Then there is the Donkey Kong 64 game as well. However, note that overall Sonic has many more games, and so wins with regards to larger library. But in terms of revolutionary nature and importance, this goes to Donkey Kong, for creating both the Donkey Kong and Mario franchises, as well as forcing Nintendo to create the D-pad. Also, overall sales are pretty close. And in terms of better game library as far as numbers, this is pretty equal, with more than 13 great games in the Donkey Kong series, and Sonic has 10 great games. However, percentage-wise, the winner is of course Donkey Kong. Although this isn't great calculation, it's a win for Donkey Kong. So having said all of this, I will be giving 1 point to Sonic and 2 points to Donkey Kong. Now I will be taking the top 10 games from each series and comparing them. First, we have the Donkey Kong 2D games and retro games. Donkey Kong 1981, Donkey Kong Jr. 1982, Donkey Kong Country 1 1994, Donkey Kong Country 2 1995, Donkey Kong Country 3 1996, and Donkey Kong Land 1997. Then we have Donkey Kong 3D games and retro games, Diddy Kong Racing 1997, and Donkey Kong 64 1999. Finally, we have Donkey Kong modern games and 2.1D games, Donkey Kong Country Returns 2010, and Donkey Kong Country Tropical Freeze 2014. The category of 2.1D games means that they have both 2D and 3D elements. The gameplay is two-dimensional whilst the graphics are three-dimensional. And since Donkey Kong was released 10 years earlier and isn't as famous as Sonic as a franchise, it hasn't made many modern games yet. However, the two modern games it has made are remarkable, and they are the 2.1 dimensional games. Personally, I think the format is perfect, being superior to both 2D and 3D. Next, I will list the Sonic games and then compare the two lists. Sonic 2D and retro games, Sonic the Hedgehog 1991, Sonic 2 1992, Sonic 3 1994, Sonic and Knuckles 1994, Sonic 3D and retro games, Sonic Adventure 1998, and Sonic 3D and modern games, Sonic Adventure 2 2001, Sonic Heroes 2003, Sonic Generations 2011, Sonic Colors 2010, and Sonic Lost World 2013. Note that Sonic Lost World has some 2.1D levels akin to the gameplay of Donkey Kong Country Returns, although there are no full-length 2D or 2.1D modern games for Sonic, and there is only one 3D retro Sonic game. Firstly, as I mentioned, Sonic Lost World 2013 has a portion of the game in 2.1D, but overall the game is very similar to the 3D Mario game, which knocks it down a few pegs. Still, it's an excellent game, just not a match for Donkey Kong Country Tropical Freeze 2014. These games naturally work better in two dimensions, and graphics-wise and overall gameplay-wise, Freeze is generally better. Not to mention, Freeze has crushed Sonic Lost World as far as reviews and sales are concerned. 2 points to Donkey Kong, none to Sonic. Now I'm going to compare Sonic Colors 2010 to Donkey Kong Country Returns 2010. The former being mostly a 3D game and the latter being 2.1D. Once again, in terms of reviews and sales, Donkey Kong Returns crushes Sonic Colors, and for good reason. Sonic Colors is at best an average 3D Sonic game, or platformer game in general. Although it has some good graphics, naturally a fairly engaging world, and sometimes forces you into 2.1D sections, it just doesn't stand up to the better Sonic games. 2 points to Donkey Kong, none to Sonic. Next we have Sonic Generations, which was released in 2011, up against Donkey Kong 64 1999, which is the latest Donkey Kong release on this list, other than the two already mentioned. Both are 3D games. Sonic Generations did well, selling 2 million copies, and has an average rating of 7.5 out of 10. However, it's no match for Donkey Kong 64, which sold roughly the same number of copies, and received, quote, universal acclaim, with an average rating of 9 out of 10. Not to mention it was the first 3D game in the series. It also met mixed feelings and did not reach the kind of level everybody hoped it would. And of course, the mechanics and graphics are not the greatest, and the gameplay etc. is not perfect, and the 200% kind of style is not for everyone. Having said all that, 1 point to Sonic and 2 to Donkey Kong. Note, comparing them in different ways may give some different results. For example, Sonic Adventure 1998 compared against Donkey Kong 64 1999 would give a win to Sonic, both being the first 3D games in the series. Sonic Adventure sold around the same number of copies and received a slightly lower rating of 8.5 out of 10. However, it received critical acclaim from reviewers and it was ahead of its time, and generally a better game overall. Because of this, I'm going to give 1 point to Sonic, to try and be as fair as possible. And now we have Diddy Kong Racing 1997, which is somewhat of a 3D game, and is of course a kart racing game, similar to Mario Kart, up against Sonic Heroes 2003, a 3D platformer. Once again, Donkey Kong crushes Sonic. Kong Racing has an average rating of 8.5 out of 10 and received critical acclaim and has sold 5 million copies. Sonic Heroes has an average rating of 7 out of 10, and the reception was, quote, mixed or average and sold 3 million copies, being an okay 3D Sonic game but not up to the standard of the 2D games or other series such as Donkey Kong or Mario. 2 points to Donkey Kong, none to Sonic. Next we have Sonic Adventure 2, 2001, up against Donkey Kong Land 3, 1997. Sonic Adventure 2 being one of the first 3D Sonic games, and Donkey Kong 3 being a 2D platformer game, and the last in the series for Game Boy. Donkey Kong Land 3 received an average rating of 8 out of 10 and sold 1 million copies on the Game Boy. Although Donkey Kong Land 3 offered a few things and may be better than the worst Sonic games, the winner is Sonic in this case with Sonic Adventure 2. 2 points to Sonic, none to Donkey Kong. Now we have Donkey Kong Country 3 1996 against Sonic Adventure 1998. Sonic Adventure was the first 3D Sonic game and truly a great 3D platformer, and it has sold at least 3 million copies, and it was called one of the greatest video games of all time. Donkey Kong Country 3 is a 2D platformer game, and the last in the original series of Donkey Kong Country games, and it has sold 2 million copies, and has an average rating of 8 out of 10. Whilst it received positive reviews, it wasn't quite up to the standard of the first games, although it had some great elements. This is a win to Sonic. 2 points to Sonic, none to Donkey Kong. Now we have Donkey Kong Country 2 1995 against Sonic and Knuckles 1994. I personally remember playing Sonic and Knuckles as a child, and I thought it was a great game. It's of course a 2D platformer game, and indeed it has an average rating of 9 out of 10, and it was praised despite its similarity to the former Sonic game. At least 2 million copies were sold. Donkey Kong Country 2 is also a 2D platformer game, released just 1 year later. It had remarkable graphics, soundtrack and gameplay, with an average rating of 9 out of 10. It received critical acclaim and has sold 5 million copies. This win goes to Donkey Kong. 2 points to Donkey Kong, none to Sonic. Next we have Sonic 3 1994 against Donkey Kong Country 1 1994. Both are 2D scrolling platformer games, of course. However, the win easily goes to Donkey Kong Country, with an average rating of 9 out of 10, sitting at 10 million sales, becoming one of the fastest selling video games in 1994, and it gained praise for its colourful nature, detail and groundbreaking graphics, and has won many awards. Sonic 3 has an average rating of nearly 9 out of 10, and has sold at least 1 million copies. And it also received critical acclaim and had great graphics with wonderful underwater sections. But nonetheless, Donkey Kong Country wins. 2 points to Donkey Kong, and at this juncture I will give 1 point to Sonic. Next we have Donkey Kong Jr. 1982 against Sonic 2 1992. Of course, both are 2D platformer games, however, Donkey Kong Jr. is not a scrolling platformer, and it was originally released on arcade. Donkey Kong Jr. has received awards, has been regarded as one of the top 100 video games, was selected to be among the 5 arcade games in the first World Championship, has seen much competitive play, is seen in other media, is listed on everybody's list of best arcade games, is one of the best-selling arcade games of all time, and one of the most popular arcade games of the golden era, and has sold 1 million copies on the NES alone. Sonic 2 has an average rating of 9 out of 10, and has won many awards and has sold over 6 million copies. It has great gameplay, level design, graphics, backgrounds, characters and music. And Sonic 2 was one of the single most successful products by SEGA and was a major factor in SEGA catching up to Nintendo in the early 1990s console wars. It also introduced the character of Tails. Having said all that, the winner must go to Sonic, with Donkey Kong winning a point. 2 points to Sonic, 1 to Donkey Kong. And finally, Sonic the Hedgehog 1991, a 2D scrolling platformer game and the first Sonic game, against Donkey Kong 1981, the first true platformer game, which let you jump, non-scrolling naturally, and the first Donkey Kong game, which also introduced Mario as Jumpman. Of course, in this game, Donkey Kong is the villain and the player controls Jumpman as the hero. Sonic the Hedgehog has an average rating of 9 out of 10 and has won many awards and was praised by critics. And it was universally praised for its fast-paced gameplay and colourful, detailed graphics. And the game has become one of the greatest video games of all time. The game has reportedly sold 44 million copies, making it one of the most successful video games of all time. Donkey Kong, on the other hand, after 1 year of release, sold 60 million arcade machines and earned $180 million in 1982. And Nintendo earned another $100 million in its second year of release, totaling $280 million US, equal to $750 million 2018. It has won many awards and has been ported to many consoles, and has of course been seen in other media. But the win goes to Sonic the Hedgehog, with a fair point going to Donkey Kong. 2 points to Sonic, 1 point to Donkey Kong. And the winner is Donkey Kong by 5 points, sitting at 15 points over Sonic's 10. Note that a few points could be given to Sonic to ensure better calculation, thus giving Donkey Kong 15 points and Sonic maybe 12 points or more. But still it seems Donkey Kong is a better video game series, truly some of the greatest, largest, most significant, most colourful and revolutionary video game series of all time. Overall, Sonic has better graphics, but the newest Donkey Kong games are giving Sonic a run for his money, and best characters go to Sonic as well. But I think sounds and music go to Donkey Kong, as does revolutionary nature, gameplay, 200% completion capabilities, world records, hidden items and otherwise aspects. Storyline-wise, this is pretty well split between the two series, and they are both very enjoyable and addictive, suitable for both children and adults, casual and hardcore gamers. In terms of characters themselves, I would say Sonic is better, and so is his name, and the gold rings are slightly better than bananas, I would suggest. So all in all, it seems like a very close match, with two similar series of platformer games, offering very different styles and paces most of the time. But nonetheless, both can be enjoyed by everyone, including the same person. The Donkey Kong games are also more difficult and offer more exploration most of the time, and also offer more extras. They are also simply more complete adult games despite their childish nature. Therefore, I conclude that Donkey Kong is superior, even if only slightly. I have been Warhammer Workshop, and you have been listening to the 6th episode of Nintendo or SEGA Searching for Memories, a gaming podcast where I discuss everything within the enterprise. Thank you.